I'd been looking forward to that dinner for weeks. Not because I thought our marriage was perfect, those illusions had been fading for a while, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, we could stitch some of it back together. 12 years. That's a lot of shared history, a lot of dinners, a lot of arguments, and a lot of quiet reconciliations. Our anniversary always felt like a checkpoint, a chance to reset. The restaurant was the same one where I proposed. White tablecloths, dim lighting that softened the edges of everything. That little window seat in the corner where you could see the city skyline between the wine racks. She wore the same perfume from that night, though I wasn't sure if that was intentional or just habit. I noticed her glancing at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. When the waiter poured our champagne, I reached across the table and took her hand. "Happy anniversary, Claire." She smiled, softly, but not quite the way she used to. "Happy anniversary, Michael." We made small talk about work, the neighbors, her latest project. I told her about a deal I'd closed that afternoon. She nodded politely, but her eyes kept drifting toward the clutch sitting on the edge of the table. A soft vibration came from it halfway through the appetizer. She reached for it quickly. I thought maybe it was her sister, her mom, somebody from family. But she glanced at the screen and hesitated. The corners of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more like a reflex she didn't want to have. "It's just someone from work," she said, as if reading my mind. "It'll only take a second." She slid the phone toward her lap, already putting it to her ear. Something in me, some instinct I couldn't quite name, acted before I could think it through. "Here," I said, reaching across the table. My voice was calm, maybe too calm. "Put it on speaker." She froze. A split second too long before saying, "It's not." "Speaker," I repeated. She tapped the screen. A man's voice came through, deep, warm, and far too familiar in tone for a coworker. "Hey, beautiful. Did you get away yet? I've been thinking about you since lunch." The fork in my hand didn't move. My breath didn't either. The words just sat there. Heavy, unapologetic. The restaurant's usual hum. Clinking glasses, murmured conversations, faint jazz from the speakers seemed to vanish. Or maybe it was still there, but I couldn't hear it over the blood rushing in my ears. The silence between us was louder than any fight we'd ever had. Claire's eyes went wide, then narrowed. "I'll call you back," she muttered into the phone. Her voice suddenly clipped. She hung up and set it down like it was something toxic. "It's not what you think," she said quickly. He's going through a breakup. He leans on me sometimes." I didn't say anything. Not because I believed her, but because I didn't trust my voice. The waiter arrived with our entrees just then, setting the plates down like we were any other couple enjoying a night out. I watched the steam curl off my steak. She picked up her fork, then set it down again. "I didn't want a night to be like this," she said, almost whispering. I let out a short laugh. Not cruel, just tired. Neither did I. We ate in near silence after that. Our conversation reduced to passing the salt and nodding at the waiter's offers for refills. She kept glancing toward the phone, like it might explain itself if she stared hard enough. I kept glancing at her hands, remembering how I'd once thought I could read every thought she had just by watching her fingers tap the table. By dessert, the champagne had gone flat. I think we both knew the night had crossed a line it couldn't uncross. But neither of us said the words. Not yet. We didn't talk much on the drive home. The hum of the tires on the wet pavement filled the space where conversation should have been. Every so often, she'd open her mouth like she was going to speak, then close it again. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands at 10 and 2, and my thoughts circling like vultures over something dying. When we pulled into the driveway, she was the first to get out. No pause, no waiting for me like she used to. Just grabbed her bag and headed inside. I sat there for a moment in the car, watching the condensation creep across the windshield, knowing that if I walked through that door right now, we'd have to face it. And I wasn't sure I was ready. Inside, she was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. "You're being quiet," she said without looking at me. "Do you want me to be loud?" I asked. My voice surprised me. It wasn't angry, just flat. She set the bottle down harder than she needed to. "Michael, you have to know it's not. Not what it sounded like." I cut in. "Because it sounded like a man who thinks of you as more than his coworker." Her lips pressed together. "You're twisting this. I've told you before." I held up my hand. "Claire, I don't want a rehearsed explanation. I want the truth." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of the woman I married. The one who laughed at my terrible cooking, who cried at movies she swore she wouldn't cry at. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by something guarded. "I'm not doing this tonight," she said, brushing past me. "It's late. I'm tired." She walked upstairs, heels clicking against the hardwood, each step a quiet retreat. I stayed in the kitchen, the smell of her wine and perfume hanging in the air. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about every little moment from the past year that hadn't made sense. The weekend conferences that never had an itinerary. The times she'd shower as soon as she got home, saying she'd had a long day. The sudden bursts of laughter when she was texting, laughter she didn't share with me. I'd noticed them all, but I'd buried each one under the same excuse. Marriage gets comfortable. People change. Don't be paranoid. Around 2 in the morning, I got up and went to my office. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, face down. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and started a document. Just a date and a line of text. Anniversary dinner. Call from coworker. Voice said, "Hey, beautiful, been thinking about you since lunch." I didn't know why I wrote it down. Maybe to keep it straight in my head. Maybe because a part of me already knew I'd need a record of this. I saved the file and shut the laptop. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. Made coffee. Talked about needing to run errands. Kissed me lightly on the cheek before heading out. I stood there in the doorway, coffee mug warming my hands, and realized I didn't believe a word of her anymore. And that was the beginning, not of a fight, but of a quiet kind of unraveling. The kind you can't stop once it starts. 2 weeks passed before I brought it up again. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I decided I wouldn't corner her without knowing exactly what I was up against. I started paying attention, noticing where her stories didn't line up, when she left the house, and how long she was gone. I didn't confront her. I didn't even change how I acted. If anything, I was kinder, softer. She seemed relieved by that, like she thought the moment had passed. Then came the night it all broke open. We were out with friends at a new rooftop bar. She excused herself halfway through the evening, stepping away to take a quick work call. Something in my chest tightened. I followed a couple minutes later, just far enough to hear her voice over the wind. "Can't tonight," she was saying. "He's right here." "No, don't say that. Not now." I waited until she hung up, then stepped forward. "Coworker again." She jumped, clutching her phone. "Michael, put it on speaker," I said, the same way I had at the restaurant. This time, she didn't move. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. And in that silence, everything between us shifted. I turned and walked back inside. She followed, hissing my name, trying to catch my arm. I didn't stop. The friends we'd been with asked where she'd gone when she finally returned, cheeks flushed. She told them I wasn't feeling well, and we left early. At home, she shut the door behind us. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," she said. I met her eyes. "Then why can't you put it on speaker?" Her breath caught, and for a moment, I thought she might finally tell me the truth. But instead, she grabbed her bag and went upstairs without another word. That was the last night we slept under the same roof. I didn't announce I was leaving. I just packed a bag the next morning, took my laptop, and went to a short-term rental downtown. She called twice. I didn't answer. Later that week, a mutual friend told me she was telling people we were taking space. I didn't correct him. The thing about silence is that it can hurt worse than shouting. At the restaurant, when her coworker spoke to her like she was his and not mine, the silence afterward told me everything I needed to know. It was the sound of something ending, not with slammed doors or broken plates, but with a kind of stillness you can't undo. Sometimes, I replay that moment in my head, not the words he said, but the gap after, when she looked at me across the table, phone still in her hand, and realized I'd heard the truth. And I think that silence was louder than any fight we could have had. It still is.